First of all, we're talking about transportation here. We're talking about the big picture. We're talking about, airlines and automobiles that together, between airline tickets and new car sales, you're talking about a combined industry with over $1 trillion a year in billings. What we're trying to do at Terrafuji is actually make transportation fundamentally more convenient, get you away from the sort of traffic jam that you see here, get you out of the security lines at airports. We are talking Jetsons in the long run. We are talking the big picture, the whole shebang, the whole 9 yards, everything that you were promised as a child, a flying car. That's what we're talking about. That's exactly what we're talking about. But we're doing it in a very incremental way, one step at a time. We're focusing initially on what we're calling the travel gap. Cars are pretty good for trips less than about 100 miles, and commercial airlines are really pretty good for trips more than about 500 miles. But there's a certain range of transportation, on average between about 100 and 500 miles, that neither of the most popular transportation alternatives solves very well. It's that sort of 100 to 500 mile travel range. It would be a long drive or a very inconvenient commercial airline flight because you get to the airport ahead of time, an hour ahead of time or so, and then you wait, you go through your security lines, and you fly for maybe half an hour, and you've got to deal with cars on the other end and all that sort of overhead and hassle. Well, what we're trying to say is, little airplanes that right now are pretty much a niche industry could be really useful for that sort of travel range. They fly faster than you can drive. They go point to point. You don't have to worry about traffic. They have a lot of things going for them. You go on your own schedule. You don't have to worry about, is there a ticket to go where I want to go when I want to go there? So why don't we use them? Nobody uses little airplanes to get, I should say that. Very few people use little airplanes to travel. So why not? Why don't we fly ourselves around? First of all, learning to fly is kind of hard. It's not as easy as driving a car. So there's some fundamental barriers to entry there that are pretty substantial. You've got to learn quite a bit about the airspace. You've got to learn about how to operate a vehicle in 3 dimensions, how to communicate with air traffic control. You've got to learn the rules of the road, but for the sky. So there's a pretty big learning curve associated with becoming a pilot today. That's a pretty big barrier to entry. It takes a while to get through that. And then once you do get through that, flying yourself somewhere isn't really as practical as it sounds. And it's a shame. But little airplanes are just more fundamentally sensitive to bad weather than your car is, or than commercial airliners are. So if I'm flying a little airplane somewhere, I can go somewhere and the weather can turn on me and I can be stuck there. I might have to rent a car, drive home, go back and pick up my plane at another time. If I can't count on it to get there, it's not really a very good alternative for me as a real practical transportation choice. Secondly, there's a high recurring cost of ownership. And this is due to a couple different factors. First of all, most of the time, if you own an airplane, you tend to keep it at the airport. That can be very expensive. There's not a lot of room at the airport. Around the major metropolitan areas, it can run you over $1,000 a month just to keep a plane in a hangar at an airport. That's a pretty big barrier to entry. You've got insurance costs. You've got your maintenance costs. You've got your gas costs. Airplanes tend to consume more fuel than cars do. And that fuel tends to be more expensive than the type of gas that we use today in our cars. We also have the problem that pilots today tend to spend a lot of time stopped on the ground at the airport on either end of their trip. And there's a lot of overhead that you're doing when you're stopped on the ground. You're either planning your flight, pushing your airplane out, calling up the fuel guy, getting him to come over and gas up your plane. Maybe when you get to your destination, you've got to arrange to tie down your aircraft. You've got to arrange for some ground transportation. And all of that contributes to the fact that, on average, pilots spend about half an hour stopped on the ground on either end of their trip at the airport. When you tack on an hour of time not moving to a given door-to-door trip, it really kind of kills your average travel speed. Finally, although there's a network of over 5,000 public use airports around the United States, one on average within a half-hour drive of wherever you are. Most people don't know that, but they're all over the place. The vast majority of them have absolutely no ground transportation. So you get there, maybe there's a courtesy car that you can borrow if the pilot who arrived there before you hasn't already borrowed it. It's not a very practical thing. You get there, and then you call up a cab, and then you wait 20 minutes for it to show up and take you where you actually want to be. So that's really why we don't fly ourselves around today. I mean, I've been a pilot for more than half my life. And you know how many times I've actually flown myself somewhere when I really needed to get there? 0. I have never done that. I love to fly. I go up every excuse I get. It's a passion. It's a great hobby. But I've never done it when I really needed to get somewhere, really needed to be back at work on Monday. Enter the flying car concept. It's not a new idea, right? We've been down this road a number of times. That's one of the most common criticisms that we get is, haven't we tried this before? All that sort of thing. Yeah, we have. In fact, the first patent was issued out back in 1917. Glenn Curtiss built that thing that you see up in the upper right-hand corner. Never did more than a little bunny hop down the runway. The most successful attempt at bringing a flying driving vehicle to market, and incidentally, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, the reason that you might like to have a vehicle that flies and drives is that it really has the potential to address these problems. You know, if the weather gets bad, hey, I can drive. If I can drive home, I can keep my plane at home. I don't have to rent a hangar at the airport. If it doesn't take that long to convert between flying and driving, I don't really have to spend as much time stopped on the ground. And then I don't have to worry about ground transportation wherever I go. So these problems, which I outlined here, are actually statistically identified as the largest obstacles to the more widespread use of personal aviation. And the concept of a flying car really does address all of those issues head on. That's what kind of got us interested, and was what got all these other people interested. The closest we ever came was the one in the middle on the right there, Molt Taylor's Aerocar. The Aerocar company, founded in 1949. This was a vehicle that you could take the wings off, take the tail section off, kind of fold the wings back. It was a manual operation. With one person, it would take about 20 minutes. You would tow the wing and tail section behind you in a trailer, and you'd have a little buggy that kind of towed this whole contraption around. Didn't really fit inside a single-car garage. Took a little while to convert, but even so, he was able to get about 250 orders for this vehicle in the mid-'60s, which was pretty good for the general aviation industry at that time. Unfortunately, his business plan was scaled to be much more aggressive. This was the time when everybody was dreaming about a flying car in everybody's garage next year. And so there was a lot of optimism and some over-optimism in the business planning and the time frame for rolling out a new type of technology like this. And it never really took off. And he had a deal with a manufacturing company. They were going to tool up to produce 1,000 units a year. He just needed to get 500 orders. He didn't get it. The deal fell through. The concept got kind of a bad reputation because they thought, oh, there's no market for this. And shortly after that, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration really came into being. This was when automotive regulations were really starting to pick up. And his design, which had been certified by the CAA, the precursor to the FAA, was not able to meet federal motor vehicle safety standards. So that was the closest that really we ever came to having a flying driving vehicle before Terrafugia. What we're trying to do is transition to a better flying car. We're calling it the transition. We want to leverage new technology, modern composite materials, delivering a higher level of safety than anything before, including any of the GA aircraft, general aviation aircraft that are out there today. We can do that. We can make a vehicle that has a safety cage and crumple zones, meets crash test standards, has all those things that, like airbags that you have in your modern car today, that aren't anywhere in general aviation today because most of the general aviation airplanes that are flying around right now were designed back in the 40s and 50s. So we can bring that new level of safety, and we can make it a whole lot faster to convert between flying and driving. In fact, we can make it so it takes less time to convert between airplane mode and car mode than it would take you to get a cab. It's like putting the top down on a convertible with the transition. We can make better use of the existing infrastructure, and there is more infrastructure out there right now today to support this sort of activity than there really ever has been. Not only the network of 5,000 airports around the United States, every one of those red dots is a little public airport around the country, but also, we can take advantage of GPS, a network of satellites out there that tell you exactly where you are. When I was learning how to fly, one of the most challenging things when you're flying over an area that you've never been over is knowing where you are. I mean, there are no street signs up there. You don't know that you're on the road, going the right way. With GPS, it really lowers your workload. It makes it so much easier. You see, oh, I'm right there, and the airport's right over here. I just follow these boxes, I fly through these boxes, and I get there. It makes it so much easier today to fly than it ever really has been before. We also have new coming out in the next few years, the FAA is implementing with their next-gen air traffic control system, things like weather and air traffic in your cockpit. So basically, I can have as much information in my little airplane cockpit as airliners today have. That's pretty phenomenal capability. So with our solution, we address those 4 largest obstacles to the more widespread use of personal aviation. When the weather gets bad, land and drive. We can go at highway speeds on the ground. The transition costs less to own and operate than most airplanes out there. You can keep it at home in your garage. It runs on unleaded, super unleaded gasoline, which is about 35% less expensive than the aviation fuel that's out there. And by the way, it gets fantastic gas mileage. We're talking over 30 miles to the gallon. The door-to-door travel time is reduced, not because you're flying faster, you're actually flying slower, but you're spending less time stopped on the ground on either end of your trip. And that reduction in the stoppage time, because it takes you less than a minute to convert between flying and driving, really makes your door-to-door time much less than it would be otherwise. And of course, your last mile problem is solved. Most people don't want to go to the airport. They want to go to someplace near the airport. Finally, it's now easier than it ever has been to learn how to fly. In 2004, the FAA created a new type of pilot's license called a Sport Pilot Certificate, which takes half the time and half the money to get. You're restricted in the type of aircraft that you can fly, but you can fly as far as you want. So with this, we have the right set of circumstances with infrastructure, with regulation, with technology, that we can actually make the flying car real. And that's what we're doing. This is a picture of our production prototype pulling out of a garage, driving down the road, filling up at the gas station, driving to the airport, going through the gate. You have a little badge, get you in. You've done your background check. Flying. Flies like a normal little airplane. Drives like a normal automatic transmission car. This picture would have been perfect if we had a traffic jam on the highway below. Landing at another little airport, folding up the wings. It's like putting the top down on a convertible, driving away. It is fully street legal. And, meeting your friend or doing your business. Basically, what Terrafuji is doing is bringing a new level of freedom, flexibility, and fun, frankly. Face it, a flying car is a pretty fun idea. And people like that. We're selling a new freedom. That sells pretty well. We've built up a $30 million order backlog already. And we asked some of our customers, why they're writing a $10,000 check just to hold a place in line to buy an airplane. And this is some of what they said. The transition will provide a heretofore unavailable amount of flexibility when flying. To have an airplane and not have to pay tie-down fees, to be able to fly long distances and know that I can drive back if the weather is no good is very attractive. The versatility, the novelty, the practicality. It's exactly what I need for shorter business trips. This is the value that we're bringing to the market. And we are making aviation more accessible to a broader segment of the population because the idea captures people's imaginations. We've been hearing about flying cars literally for a century now. This is really exciting stuff for me. The chart here actually shows that in the end, about half of our customers, half of the people who have reserved an aircraft with us are not active pilots today. They're people who used to be pilots, Or they're people who never considered being a pilot before, but who are going to go out and get their pilot's license. In fact, the picture in the upper right-hand corner there is a gentleman named Mark. Mark saw a news story about Terrafugia about 2 years ago. He came down to make sure that we were actually for real, and wound up putting a deposit down on an aircraft, bought out our company's store, as you can see. He then went home, and he started training. 9 months later, he sent me the other picture on the right there. That's Mark with his new sport pilot certificate. Since then, he's gone on, and he's gotten his private pilot's license, his instrument rating. These are higher ratings, so he can now fly more and more and more often. And now he's actually moved to an air park. So his life is completely changed around, and we're not even delivering the product yet. Okay, this is big stuff. You can see the crowd at the New York Auto Show over on the left-hand side, and then Katie Kirk and the Good Morning America team over there on the bottom. And, you know, people know, as you probably see, you know, Popular Science has put a flying car in their cover, I think, every year for the past 50 years. And flying cars, it's an idea that captures people's imagination, the idea that you could get away, you could get above traffic. Terrafugia is here to say you can. So, right now, our focus is on the Transition, which is our commercial product. We're also working on a military program called the DARPA TX program. We're a subcontractor. Can't talk as much about that program, but it's nice. It's very cool stuff, vertical takeoff and landing, autonomous flight, stuff so that in the future, people won't have to be as trained. You can basically tell the vehicle where you want to go, and it will take you there. That is coming. And we will, someday, be like the Jetsons. So that is the end of my talk, and I think we may have a little time for questions.
Carl, thank you. Thanks, Carl.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, stick around. Stick around, Carl. We have questions. Let me see. We'll get to the Jetsons. But first, what's the range again?
Over 400 miles.
400 miles without filling up.
That's correct, yeah, in the air.
Okay. And can I take off of 93 if there's no traffic?
No.
How about the HOV lane? There's never any traffic there.
No, you do have to go to one of these little airports. But as I said, there's this network of 5,000 public airports around the country. There's one on average within a half-hour drive of pretty much wherever you are. So you drive to one of those airports. You can find out where they are. You can hit the nearest button on the GPS. It'll tell you where it is, whether you're flying or driving, guide you right to it, take off.
Okay, understood. But if I want to take off in the HOV lane, how many feet do I have?
Sure, yeah.
What's the...
So you do have to have 1,700 feet to get over a 50-foot obstacle.
Okay.
You do have to be stopped on the ground, and we have to shut down your engine, and then you have to enter in.
At the end of the
So if you want to convert between flying and driving, you have to stop, shut down your engine, enter in a personal identification number on a keypad. So if somebody steals your flying car, they're not going to be able to go joyride around with it. And
why am I doing that? Just so they can't steal it, or so that you know
level
where
of
I took
security.
off?
No. It's an extra level of security.
Security, okay.
Yeah. And then at that point, you just push a couple buttons and the wings extend.
Yeah. I'm stopping the engine, why?
Because your power is changing from one drive system to your propeller.
Okay. Now still, if I wanted to do it, who's going to stop me?
Well, we've talked about developing a vehicle for law enforcement that actually could do that.
Just when we were having fun.
But your vehicle, unfortunately, probably will not be able to do that. It is actually, it's one of the things that you're taught in flight training, is that in an emergency situation, generally speaking, you want to look for an open field or something like that instead of roads, because roads tend to have power lines, street lights, signs near them, things like that may be hard to see from 1,000 feet up. So it's a lot easier and actually a lot more safe in an emergency to
How many hours to get a sport pilot's license?
The minimum is 20 hours. Most people do it in about 35.
35 hours? So I could do it in a few weeks if I really...
If you are committed, yeah. You have to learn some things also, but yeah, that's about the time. Not you in particular. You might know it all.
I mean, our operating assumption in this country, our assumption anyway, is that everybody can drive, basically, right?
Sure.
Can everybody fly, or some people just don't like have the spatial sense? Or
You know,
would you be comfortable with every driver on 93 also being a flyer of one of your things?
There are different learning curves, and it's interesting. I mean, you hit on a point because in society there are folks who are not comfortable with the idea. But it really is.
I've
something,
sat next to some of them on the commercial flight.
But it's something where it's like anything. You get up the learning curve, and you're not going to get a pilot's license unless you're qualified. There's a very rigorous process.
Okay, so they'll be watching and paying attention.
Absolutely, you're going to have flight instructors. You're going to have a flight examiner. It's a very rigorous process.
Paula asks on Twitter, how is traffic managed if cars fly?
It's a great question, and this is actually one of the new things that's coming out over the next few years as the FAA implements their next generation air traffic control system. It's a very exciting time because today all of air traffic control is managed through voice communication. There's a control tower on the ground that's talking on the radio to people in airliners or in little airplanes like the Transition. Over the next 5 to 10 years, that's going to shift to basically text messaging. And with text messaging, you can handle a much higher level of volume. It's not standard text messaging.
That means my daughter can fly.
Yeah. But it is that's basically what it is. It's a digital communication format that's much higher bandwidth. You can handle a lot more aircraft in the same
I don't really
airspace.
get that. Like, I'm texting, look, I'm right over Logan in my little car.
It is a little different than that, but it's something where your official communications with the ground can be done through a text message type system.
I'm still not sure. Oh, well, let me put it to you this way. In your big Jetsons vision, what portion of personal transportation migrates from ground-bound automobiles to Terra Fugia land?
Yeah. So we do get asked this question a lot.
When we see in the sci-fi movies, where like those dark cities, everybody's flying around and landing in skyscrapers.
Yeah, so this sort of vehicle, the type of vehicle that we're coming out with now, is very useful for certain types of travel. For instance, if you're a regional salesperson, things like that. So it's going to start small. But over time, as it becomes more and more useful, and we add more and more, basically, of the autonomous flight capability, and make it easier for people like you.
That means I don't have to fly it.
Eventually,
that's
that's the direction that all of this stuff is going.
I like that.
Is that in the long run, you will have to know less to operate the vehicle safely. And that's where all this stuff is going in the future. Now, we can't do that today. That's not a 5-year plan. That's the 10, 15, 20-year type vision. But that's where this stuff is going. And it will take that sort of time scale in order to really roll out and have any sort of impact that you would notice, right? If you just look outside today, you look up in the sky, and here you actually see quite a bit of traffic going into Logan. But most places, you don't see any airplanes up there. In the next 10 years, you're still not going to. It's not going to, like the skies are not going to be.
No doubt we're even skeptical about whether, how it's all going to go, because there's been many times before.
Right.
But in the Carl Dietrich, in the shower, daydreaming, vision, is like there's much up there as there is down here.
There is more possibility up there. There's just more room up there. It's easier. The airspace can handle, in theory, orders of magnitude more vehicles than the highways can today. Orders of magnitude more.
You think it'll happen someday? It'll look like that, or maybe
at some point in the distant future.
If we have the Simon Johnson depression, maybe we'll be on scooters.
It absolutely is possible, and the economic forces actually do push in that direction because you can do more with your time. The most valuable thing in the world is time.
Yeah.
And that's what this can give people.
I know the VCs love to hear that. Now, about all those concrete barriers around our public buildings, those are to stop terrorists.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question.
Carl.
No, we get that question a lot. So it turns out if you wanted to do harm with this vehicle, or at all, you would be far better renting a cargo van than you would by flying our vehicle into a building. It's one of those things that it sounds scary, but in terms of the actual impact that it can have, because the vehicle is very lightweight.
Mm-hmm. How many pounds can it carry? Passengers?
This first one is a 2-person vehicle.
And so what, 300 pounds? 400, 500? We're Americans.
Yeah, you're talking about, you're talking about 430 pounds maximum.
Single passenger.
Even if even if that was all,
Okay.
you know,
Ammonium nitrate.
explosives
yeah.
or something like that,
Yeah.
you still couldn't do as much damage as you could do with a cargo van.
You have $30 million in back orders, and you're not building them yet. How many do you need ordered?
It's not a question of, right now we're focused on the development. We're focused on getting the vehicle. I showed pictures from our testing program.
Yeah.
The vehicle is actively in that testing program right now, and it's made some great progress. We're flying and driving all the time right now, but we have quite a few tests that we have to run. We have to meet federal motor vehicle safety standards for driving on the road, as well as the FAA regulations.
Is that looking promising?
It is. It's looking quite promising. We're moving forward. The roadmap as we have it laid out right now would have us rolling out a small pilot fleet of vehicles starting about a year from now.
Cool.
And then, beyond that, we would expand production, a couple years down the road.
Carl Dietrich, you're beyond dreaming. We're really proud of you. It's very exciting, and we're so grateful to you for telling us
Thank you
about
for
it
having me.
today. Thank you so much. Thank you. Carl Dietrich.